Today we will discuss about GDP, gross domestic product, and how do we measure or how do we calculate GDP? Are we contributing anything to the GDP? Whatever we do in our daily day-to-day life are a kind of contribution to the GDP. All this we will see in this session. Let's look at an example here and understand in a better way. We see it in this picture. Let's assume that it is Tamil Nadu and say we have a garment factory in Tirupur and we produce shirts and we sell that shirt at say 100 rupees per piece. And you see two families there. Okay, the one family, a person works in this factory and he gets salary every month, and using the salary he goes to the shop and purchase the food item for the family. And here we also see a farm. They produce vegetable. Say they are producing tomato mainly and they sell it in the shop. Let's assume that they sell tomato at rupees 10 per kg. And the second family, the person works in the farm and they get paid for the work they do. And whatever the money they get, they go to the shop and buy the items for their family. The reason I am showing this example to understand in a simple way, how each family or a company contributing to our GDP. All these examples, okay, you see that, if it is a family is earning something like salaries. Okay, so that means there is an income which is coming and they go to the shop and buy items for the daily food and other things. So they are making some expenses. And if you look at the garment shop, okay, they also paying salary, okay, while selling the shirt they also get revenues. That means in all these points, all these examples, we find a flow of cash, right? What we see here, we see an exchange of goods and services or a circular flow of income and expenditure. To understand the definition itself, the GDP, it's very important to understand the concept, the situation. Okay, we'll take a look at the definition of GDP. What is a GDP? GDP is basically the nation's overall economy's total production, gross domestic production. So in a simple way we define that the GDP is the market value of all the final goods and services produced within a country in a given period. In the previous example, we have seen the shirt sold at 100 rupees. Shirt were selling at rupees 100 per piece. So the GDP contribution is rupees 100. And when we compare with that definition, see the shirt is produced within a country, correct? And it is a final product. Shirt after producing we are selling at rupees 100. Okay, so what the shirt market price is 100. So the market value of all final, that means market value of that shirt is 100 rupees. So the GDP contribution is rupees 100. Similarly, let's look at the farm. Farm is selling the tomato say at rupees 10 per kg. And their contribution to the GDP is 10. All these are taken place in Tamil Nadu. It's in the same country. Now it's very easy to understand the definition. Let's look at the definition again. The market value of all the final goods and services produced within a country in a given period. In a given period means normally the GDP is calculated in yearly basis and quarterly or half yearly. That is the main three periods which normally countries use. So all the terms what we discuss in this definition, we find it in the example too. See the market value we found. Okay, all the final goods and services. Final means the one which we are selling to the market. Now let's look at the formula, GDP formula. There are three main approaches to measure GDP. One is called expenditure approach, second income approach, and the third one is value added approach. The expenditure approach has 5 categories. One is consumption, investment, government spending, and export and imports. And you may find little confused by these words normally, because the word we use in our day-to-day life, the meaning of these words may be little bit of different from the economical terms. So we'll understand in a simple way. What is an investment? See, for we all of us, an investment is like, we deposit something in the bank as a fixed deposit, or we invest in stocks. Okay, that is an investment. That is an investment for as an individual. That is the meaning of investment. When we look at the country's economical view of investment is, building a hospital, or if we construct a building or a factory, or all such building something new can be considered as investment. It is the whole economical view or whole country's perspective. This is the meaning of investment. And next is consumption. What is a consumption? We go to a shop, buy an ice cream, okay, and we eat it. So we consume something. And similarly, we go for a movie. It is a spending. We spend something for our entertainment. Okay, this is a consumption. If you look at in a personal or individual way, when you look at economical terms, okay, it's education or medical expenses. Those things are a consumption, total expenses. Country's total consumption, spending for the whole economy, or anything, any expenses, okay, considered as a consumption. These terms and example we are discussing just to understand, okay, to when you look at the formula, okay, it's a little bit of, it will make some confusion. To avoid that confusion, we are just putting up some examples to understand it. And what is a government spending? Government spending is something like, for the military services, okay, all military, Indian military services, we have to allocate money for certain purposes, so that will be considered as a government spending. Next, the final one comes as a net export. What is a net export? Net export means difference between export and import. And we know that, import and export. Let's look at the previous example with the shirt. Shirt we produce at 100 rupees. Okay, we are selling at 100 rupees. Say we are exporting it to Dubai. We are sending those clothes to Dubai. So we are exporting it. Okay, and some of our phones and some of the items, we know that it is a China made. Okay, that means we are importing. We are importing to our country. We are importing those Chinese products. So that means we see an import and we see an export. So the difference between these two can be considered as the net export. That is what we will be taking out in this expenditure approach. And the definition is, see plus I plus G plus net export, that is X minus M. So C, we know that it is consumption, I is an investment, G is government spending, okay, and net export becomes the difference between import and export, that is X minus M. Next is income approach. Income approach to GDP is adding up all the income earned within the country in the particular period. The income approach add, we see that wages and rents, interest and profit. And here is the formula for calculating the income approach to GDP. And the next part is value added approach. So that we'll see it in the next section. And in the next section we'll also understand what is GNP per capita, okay, and what is Indian GDP, and what is Tamil Nadu's contribution to Indian GDP. All these things we'll understand it in the next section.